All right, we are live. We have got one person on location in her car, her truck today.
On location.
Gotta do what you gotta do when you got the kids to have stuff going on,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Awesome. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and cue
Yeah.
our
My son
intro.
has.
Okay.
I was just going to say, my son has one of his first college classes tonight. So
Nice. Good. Awesome. Well, let me cue the intro and then we'll be back. All right.
All right. Are you pumped up after that?
Pumped up and ready to go. So, for anyone who's brand new, we are going through this textbook called Ketogenic: The Science of Therapeutic Carbohydrate Restriction in Human Health. And this is not a book club, it's a study club, and we do not read ahead of time, which shows, right?
Yeah.
We read we read and discuss as we go. So, are you two both doing okay today? It looks like you got a nice sunny day there, Kim.
yeah, it's towards the end of it, but I mean it's
Yeah.
5:30 now. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's been kind of mild in Kentucky though.
Same here.
Oh, yeah, here too. It's been, I think for the next week, our high here is supposed to be like 69, or it's been in the upper 60s. So it's kind of weird. A little bit cool for this time of the year. But I guess better that. And Carrie, you're getting ready to go to the conference this weekend, right? Tomorrow.
Vote for Better Health. That's tomorrow. My brother, my almost carnivore brother, and I are going to be heading out around noon. And then we're going to check in. And tomorrow night is the dinner. It's like a dinner with the speakers and stuff. And so, and I think from what I gather, there's going to be like a panel discussion. So
nice.
I'm going to be fangirling. Look, I got it right here, my hard copy of Brain Energy, because I love this man. And the only one I'm going to have left to meet is going to be, I mean, I would love to meet all of them, but I've got my top 3, Dr. Berry, and I met him. Getting ready to meet Chris Palmer. And I would love to meet Ben Bickman. I just love him.
You got to go up and say hi.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we got a few people here. Hi, Minka's cats, and I don't know your real name. I'm assuming your real name is Minka. But I love to see you here all the time. And we have a hello from Julie. Very good to see you from Alabama. Kim sideways again. Awesome. So I have that book. He's amazing. Awesome. Good. Oh, and she said yes. Her name is Minka. I love that name. That's a great name.
I'm sideways. I'm sorry, guys.
Kim's been wrestling with her phone. There you go. Trying to.
Well, I went to the comments. I can't look at the comments. I tried to look at the comments and it's not letting me.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I guess we'll have to.
Just so y'all know.
We'll try to keep track of them for you.
Okay.
So, all right. Good. Well, we'll be anxious to hear how things go this weekend at the conference, and hopefully you get to meet everybody that you want to meet. Just go up and say hi. Don't be shy.
And if anybody, excuse me, happens to be going and they see me, come up to me, say hello. Now, Dr. Bickman, unfortunately, isn't going to be there, so I'll have to meet him at some other time. But I will at least get to meet Dr. Palmer, and I'm just there again. I'm going to, hopefully I won't swoon, but I just love his work. I really do. And in my day job, I won't get too much into it, but I do work in the field of mental health, although I do data analysis and IT.
Yeah.
It's in the mental health space. And so I would really love to somehow connect him or just find resources for my employer to use. Maybe, I don't know. I'm still brainstorming.
Yeah.
But.
Well, if you get a chance to talk to him, ask him if he will come on for Q&A if we do his book on our Sunday book club.
Oh, okay. I will do that.
I mean, put them on the spot.
Well, hey, the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
That's right.
right.
That's
That's
right. What's he
right.
going to do? Say no? You know?
Well, he might, but I, if we like agreed to keep it like at a limited time, like even 30 minutes, and just pick
Yeah.
like really, key pointed questions,
Yeah.
he might
Because
do
there's always
something.
those questions that when we get finished reading the book that we're kind of like unsure about still.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Before we start, Julie has some interesting comments and a question here. So she said she's been, I'm assuming that's beef bacon, but there's an E. There's an E missing. So beef bacon, but I can't talk today.
Beef, butter, bacon, and
Beef, butter,
eggs.
and bacon. Since last June, hasn't worked. 300 pounds, type 2, not reverse at all. And then back in 2016, I was on a ketogenic diet, lost over 100 pounds. So she know why isn't the carnivore diet working for me? That's a fantastic question.
I have a thought.
You have a thought.
couple of
Okay.
thoughts. One thought could be, have you had lab work done? I've heard Dr. Berry talk about that, like hormones and things like that can keep you from losing the weight. Another thing, especially if your diabetes isn't reversing, have your insulin checked, because if you're not producing any insulin, you might actually have like LADA or something like, where you develop diabetes later in life.
Yeah.
So that's something key to get checked too.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you're
of things.
eating enough fat. Yeah, it's hard to say because we don't know specifically what you're eating.
True.
I'd be curious to know too, how are you feeling, if you're feeling any better or if you're just it's the weight loss issue. Because I mean, we're all complex, right? We're all individual, and we don't know where your starting point is as far as your health goes. But
Yeah, I mean, there's so many factors that go into this that if you're set on carnivore, I mean, if you did so good on keto, I would probably just go back to keto if it were
I
me.
would probably too. Yeah.
But if you're set on carnivore, you could always hire a coach that could actually review your true numbers and kind of point some stuff out, because it's a lot more complicated than just eat fatty meat until you're full,
Yeah.
Especially if it can be for women. I don't know how old you are, but as a middle-aged woman myself, I can tell you that it's more complicated than just eat meat.
Yeah, it definitely is. And there's, without knowing all the details, it's hard, but I can imagine the frustration, because it's got to be frustrating when you hear other people who are on the carnivore diet talking about all these great, results. So she said she's always checks her blood sugar. It is always high. So maybe
how high are you talking about?
How high?
And have you had an A1C and
terrible?
Oh.
And how long did she say she'd been on it?
Since last June.
So over a year?
Is it last June of 2023 or June of 2024? If you can clarify that would be helpful. It sounds like it was June of 2023, but maybe it's 2024. So that's only at a couple months. But with the blood sugar still high, it might be worthwhile getting a continuous glucose monitor and find out what's keeping it up there.
I mean, it's almost too little information for us to give any true relevant recommendations.
Yeah, so she said that she's going back on the ketogenic diet, that it gave me great success. Yeah, I mean, if you had something that gave you a lot of success, then you felt good and you had lost weight. She said she's 65. Yeah, I mean, we're definitely none of us are saying you have to be on a carnivore diet. It's very individual.
I think it's the proper human diet spectrum, and ketogenic diet is part of that. And if your body does better with that, I've even heard Dr. Berry tell people, if you did great on keto, go back to keto. I mean, why not? It sounds like you did really well on keto, and for whatever reason, if carnivore isn't working for you, That would be my recommendation without seeing,
Yeah.
numbers and, seeing more specifics on your.
And
I'm
it's
no
been
health
8
coach or anything,
years
but
since 2016, so there can be some metabolic issues that have happened since then in your body, and it still wouldn't hurt to get a big, a lab workup done just to
yeah, I would definitely do
rule out
that.
thyroid and, like I said, the insulin, see if you even
Yeah.
are producing any, because really, if you're eating carnivore and plenty of fat, theoretically speaking, your blood sugar should be very consistently low, like low, or, not low, but just a steady, healthy range.
Unless you're
Yeah.
like me and you need to keep it low histamine, because, and there's a lot of people who do. And because for me, the histamine was a huge issue, very inflammatory, causing a lot of problems for me. And until I went low histamine carnivore, I really didn't turn a corner. I mean, I was losing weight and I was slowly improving, but man, when I went low histamine, got the higher histamine carnivore foods out of my diet, I just turned a corner like crazy. So, yeah.
I'm hoping that I'm
Mhm.
hoping my phone's not going to overheat. Sometimes
Oh,
being up in the, like it's kind of up in the window, I'm going to put my jacket over it. Sorry, guys.
oh yeah. All right, we got Dave and Austin. Very good. Austin,
Hey.
great to see you. Okay, all right. You guys ready to jump in? So we left off at
1.3.6.
all right. You want to dive in there, Carrie?
Sure, I'll dive in. Analysis by the Task Force of the American Society for Clinical Nutrition. In July 1978, the American Society for Clinical Nutrition, ASCN, convened its own task force to evaluate the scientific validity of the proposed dietary interventions. Their concern was that the advice that scientists provide to government officials frequently takes the form of advocacy, in which those scientists put forth those efforts of the total body of data that support the change in public policy that they favor. Yeah, imagine that happening.
Oh, I
In
know.
other words,
Right?
yeah. In other words, the concern was that the scientists were cherry picking. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Oh, they wouldn't do that, right?
Come on. They wouldn't do that. That the scientists were cherry picking only the data that supported their particular biases. What was needed was an independent panel of experts with a wider range of opinions and biases. So, because everybody has biases, so that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
The result was that the ASCN task force sampled the opinions of 9 panelists who, on the basis of all the evidence, epidemiological, randomized controlled trials, animal studies, and proposed biological explanation, rated out of a possible score of 100, 10 specific issues relating specific nutrients as causative agents for specific diseases. And that's what's in table 1.6.
Okay, so I pulled the table up here. So at the bottom part, which is kind of small to read, says panelists considered that on the basis of the best evidence, there were only 2 nutrient disease relationships for which evidence was conclusive. These were proven relationships between alcohol and liver disease and carbohydrates and dental caries. The evidence the panelists considered was also detailed in a series of peer-reviewed articles. So they're linking. I don't know. Is it one like the top? This, I guess, the strongest relationship based on the mean score. So, like, I guess there's a strongest relationship between alcohol and liver disease, carbohydrates and cavities, salt and hypertension. Which now, like, we realize that this regular table salt can be, is more linked to hypertension, but the other salts, like the sea salts and those really good Himalayan salts and those types of things, are based on the doctors I've heard, carnivore docs, they say that there's no link with them to hypertension. So I think we're pretty good with the salts that we use. So yeah, so dietary cholesterol, fat, and CHD. Well, we know how those studies are, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, so you look at all of these things, and we've just based on all of the study we've done, not just here, but in our book club, we know that these nutritional studies that they're basing all of this on are really poor, right? They're usually very poor quality, like, you know, like dietary cholesterol and fat. I mean, we know that they use things like lasagna, right,
Mhm.
to test, what people were eating. So,
Yeah.
all right. So, all right, Kim, you want to take the next one?
Dietary 1.3.6.1 dietary cholesterol and atherosclerosis. Henry C. McGill reviewed the evidence linking specifically dietary cholesterol intake and the development of atherosclerosis, whereas Charles Gluck reviewed the evidence linking dietary fat intake with atherosclerosis. Okay. McGill concluded it was virtually impossible to detect an independent effect of dietary cholesterol on either blood cholesterol concentrations or on the development of coronary atherosclerosis. His reasoning was that in population studies, the intake of cholesterol is always associated with the intake of fat, especially saturated fat. He was also wary of conclusions drawn from population studies when applied to individuals. Associations between two variables based on group means do not permit inferences to be drawn about the corresponding associations between individuals within a single group. In other words, all individuals respond to in their own peculiar ways to different interventions, so that those individual responses cannot be predicted from observational studies of large populations.
I'm
He
glad
can,
he's saying that because that's exactly like what we were talking to Julie about. We're all individual, and like
yeah,
how we react to this specific diets is depending on so many factors.
yeah.
So it was nice to hear that somebody was pointing that out.
He concluded that a reduction in dietary cholesterol intake might produce a modest reduction in total atherosclerotic disease without causing any other known deleterious effects, a conclusion which, in retrospect, is simplistic, because removing cholesterol from the diet requires the removal of all animal produce, including eggs, a move which would be detrimental, especially in more deprived communities at risk of nutritional deficiencies. McGill recognized this. The implementation of low cholesterol diet carries with it some degree of risk, however small, due to changes of food processing or food purchasing, or to unforeseeable hazards for individuals with marginally adequate diets. One unforeseeable hazard was the manner in which the food processing industry would willfully exploit this invitation to replace fat in the diet. Instead of filling this nutritional gap with an increased protein intake, as Stamler and others had assumed would happen, it filled the taste gap with sugar, unleashing a global pandemic of sugar-driven addictive eating behaviors. In his extensive review of the literature, McGill made a few important points. First, that in controlled experiments in humans, dietary cholesterol did influence serum cholesterol concentration, but to a lesser degree than saturation of dietary fatty acids. This had been acknowledged even by Keyes himself, who had written, for all practical purposes, the dietary cholesterol variable can be disregarded. As a result, Dr. Stuart Tresswell, MD, another Keyes acolyte, concluded that lowering dietary cholesterol intake by reducing weekly egg intake from 5 to 2 eggs per week would produce an effect too small to be advisable. Tresswell also emphasized the nutritional value of eggs. Second, that association studies cannot prove causation, but can only serve as suggestive evidence for a causal relationship. However, numerous cross-sectional studies have failed to find a significant independent association of dietary cholesterol with either serum cholesterol concentrations or with risk of atherosclerotic heart disease. Third, any attempt to lower blood cholesterol concentrations by simply lowering dietary cholesterol intake would be ineffective. Rather, this would only be accomplished by changes in a variety of dietary components. This is kind of shocking.
So what are your thoughts?
It's kind of shocking.
It is. Well, and we've learned too that the body we produce our own cholesterol.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, and we know that if we, if we adjust what we eat in our diet, our body is going to make up for it, and our body produces the majority of the cholesterol that we use. So it's kind of, pointless.
And from what I've heard, you can't really eat enough cholesterol to really affect your cholesterol like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's such a fraction of what your body actually needs,
Right. Right. And I mean, we know now how important cholesterol is for our health, for our brain, and
hormones.
Yes, for hormones. And we've learned that statins only lower the big fluffy cholesterol that has no effect on us from a heart health perspective. So I want to kind of pick up on the comments. Julie, what do you mean by low histamine? And we did get some answers. Julie, what I'll do, I did a video on my channel about low histamine. I'll copy it into the live. And so since this is a new concept for you, my video is specifically on low histamine with a carnivore diet.
Yeah, it's a really good video
Mm-hmm.
too.
So let me go find it real quick and I'll copy it and paste the link into this, because if you're not familiar with the concept of low histamine, and I mean, there's so many people who have histamine issues and don't realize it. And if you're not familiar with my story with mast cell activation syndrome, there's so many people who have my condition too and don't realize it. Like if you're constantly feeling terrible and can never figure out why, it might be something you might want to look into. Let's see. Let me see if I can find. I'll find my video. What I'll do is I'll post. I can't find it right now. I've been doing too many videos, but let me just look up histamine, and I'll make sure I get it posted. Oh, here we go. I found it. Okay. Copy and paste. And I put a source in there too. Did we lose Kim?
I believe we did.
All right,
He's back.
Yeah.
So my phone rang and it disconnected me. I guess I need to put it on airplane mode.
Yeah. But so for Julie, I also put a really good resource in the video in the description. And so even if you're on a ketogenic diet, it'll give you
Okay.
a very thorough list of high histamine foods. So.
Okay. Am I back totally now?
I think she's back.
Okay. I'm kind of an idiot. I tried to put it on airplane mode. That's not going to work. Duh.
Oh, yeah. You're not going to get anything.
I want the phone to not ring and disrupt my live. But, oh well. Anyway, let's keep reading in case
I got my husband's iPad. I got my husband's iPad sitting over here, and I keep asking him to turn the ringer off whenever I'm live. It just doesn't happen. So if you hear a ringer, that's why. But okay. So all right. So we've we know how those studies are with cholesterol, and we've learned so much about them. So, um, okay, so the next section, 1.3.6.2, dietary fat, plasma cholesterol concentration, and atherosclerosis. This is kind of I guess it's not too long. So in his submissions, Glueck concluded that studies of dietary fat intakes within population groups, for example, by comparing individuals rather than population groups, have usually failed to show a correlation between dietary fat intake levels, plasma cholesterol concentrations, and incidence of atherosclerotic disease. He also noted that there are few precedents for use of dietary fats, for use of diets high in polyunsaturated fats, and that the benefits that might accrue from the ingestion of a low fat, low saturated fat, low cholesterol diet has never been adequately tested, except in terms of reduction in plasma lipid levels, which we know, we don't want to lower those necessarily if they're the right kind of lipids. So despite his inability to find any solid evidence to support Key's twin hypothesis, Glueck's personal bias was clearly apparent in his second paper. Thus, the failure of studies to support the lipid hypothesis were, according to Glueck, because the studies, quote, began in adults whose atherosclerosis was advanced and potentially irreversible. This is an example of post hoc rationalization. When the experiment fails to produce the desired result, the experiment, not the hypothesis, is at fault. That is so not science. But that is not how proper science is meant to work. Oh, I spoke too soon. All right, so in relation to the multi-million-dollar multiple risk factor intervention trial, or MR-FIT, Mr. Fit, then being conducted, Glueck wrote, if Mr. Fit ends in a favorable conclusion, we will be able to move ahead with confidence to improve the prognosis for a group of high-risk patients, perhaps with a significant improvement in overall national vital statistics. The reverse of this statement must equally apply. If Mr. Fit or any other similar studies failed to show any benefit for these risk factor interventions, then the NIH/AHA Alliance should have declared that the interventions it tested were ineffective. Thus, there's no further justification to waste more taxpayer dollars exploring this blind alley. But when the Mr. Fit failed completely by establishing that reducing multiple coronary risk factors did not have any measurable effect on coronary heart disease outcomes, the Alliance remained silent. Instead, it invested in yet more expensive dietary intervention trials exploring the same blind alley for decades, all the time invoking the same false post hoc rationalizations to explain why these interventions failed to produce the results that the researchers, quote unquote, knew were there, waiting to be found, but which had somehow eluded their grasp. So I guess they just didn't do the study properly. Is that what they're saying?
Yeah.
If your hypothesis turns out to be wrong, you blame the study instead of saying your hypothesis is wrong. Oh my goodness. Okay. Where did I leave off? Indeed.
Yes.
Right? Okay. So indeed, the post hoc rationalizations that the NIH/AHA Alliance would adopt were exactly those anticipated by Glueck. If the Mr. Fit does not succeed in achieving a significant reduction in events, despite a reduction in risk, the most likely explanation will be that the period of intervention was too short and the degree of cholesterol lowering was too small. So I guess give it more time. So this is precisely the explanation used to explain, for example, why the most expensive of these trials, $700 million Women's Health Initiative randomized controlled dietary modification trial, or the worst CDMT, also failed to produce the expected outcomes. I didn't realize they spent $700 million on that trial.
Wow.
That's insane. So instead, recent independent analysis of that trial have established beyond doubt that the authors hid evidence that the low-fat, heart-healthy, prudent diet caused harm to the health of those with established coronary heart disease. Gluoc even extended his argument also to absolve the yet-to-be-released results of the lipid research clinical trials of any relevance that should that trial also fail to produce the desired results. And then we have a quote here that says, if the lipid research clinic's trial should end in a negative or equivocal result, the lipid hypothesis will not have been dealt a fatal blow. The atherosclerotic disease process may already have progressed too far to be arrested in these severely hypercholesterolemic subjects. So instead of yeah, it's the subject's faults, right?
Oh my gosh.
So instead of accepting the findings from any future trials that might show that the low-fat diet does not improve health, Gluoc was arguing that the NIH-AHA Alliance would simply ignore any negative findings based on their collective faith that somehow Key's hypothesis would be proven correct. So it's a religion, I guess.
Oh Lordy, guys.
So
just ignore any findings if they don't go your way.
Yeah,
they can just leave studies locked in somebody's garage.
Yeah.
You heard about that one. I mean, wasn't released for years until the person was deceased, and I think a nephew or somebody found it in the garage. And
wasn't it the 22 country study or the 7 country studies?
That was
I think it was a different one, but it was pretty old. I don't think it was that one.
I thought it was that one.
I think it is. I think it was the complete data set was what was locked away, because they initially thought it was really 7, because he published 7 countries, right? But then I
thought they found out about that way before this study was discovered, but maybe not.
I don't know.
I'm just very vague
it was in one of the books we read.
We've gone through so many clinical trials, I can't keep them straight. But yeah, there was definitely one major trial where they found data later that wasn't included.
Because the trial was never, what it was this trial was never released. Like the results were just never released to the public. It just like they were authorized to do it. And then nobody ever heard a peep about the results of it.
Yeah.
Do you know how many of those types of trials? It's not just in nutrition. It's in all areas where if the trial does not show, or disproves a hypothesis, a lot of them don't get published.
Yeah.
So you're looking at, we have that. I don't remember specifically off the top of my head, but I remember reading about like medical studies, clinical trials about specific diseases where, or treatments for diseases where they only published the studies that showed that the treatment worked, didn't publish all the studies that showed that it didn't.
Yep.
Yeah, you don't make money off of a treatment that doesn't work, right? You've got,
and that I believe that's what they did with the statins for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
definitely. But this is basically blaming everything except for, like, it's blaming, right? It's either the participants were too far gone, and then why did you choose those participants, right? Or the trial period was not long enough, or there's all these things that they are criticizing that on their own, like the way they set the study.
I'm on a live video. I'm sorry, somebody's walking up to my car.
Oh, where are they wanting money?
Yeah, well, he was asking me where the homeless shelter was, basically, but I'm sure he was getting there. Sorry, guys. I just got scared. This is the second time this has happened to me in a week.
Really?
I was sitting in my truck with my window down at a stoplight, middle of town, and this woman walks up on the roadside. Now it's a 2-lane road. She walks up on the roadside and asks me, like right in my face, says, "Ma'am," and I was like, I mean, just it scared me to death. I
Oh,
have
that
my
would,
startle reflexes.
oh, that would freak me out.
Yeah.
Me
Anyway,
too.
sorry guys. Sorry.
So, okay.
Okay.
So, all right. So he says the studies needed to prove statins performed. They needed the ammo to back the prescriptions, another fake news topic that is critical to our health. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And, we see that all the time, right?
Oh
That,
yeah.
yeah, we see the results that help promote the product that they want us to take. Yeah. I never heard it. I never heard anywhere about statins and all these. I mean, and you know how they do the drug commercials, which I don't think should even be allowed, but it is, right? And then they have all of the potential side effects and the disclaimers, right? That they list off under their breath and rattle off as fast as they can.
Yeah.
I
Anal
feel like,
seepage.
yeah, I feel like they should also say, oh, and by the way, taking this may extend your life by 3 days, because that's what the study showed, right?
Yeah.
You may have all these side effects and it may buy you 3 more days, but with the side effects.
Yeah, because who would actually take that?
Nobody would.
Right.
Nobody.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay. All righty. Carrie.
Okay. Let's see. 1.3.6.3. Sugar, carbohydrates, type 2 diabetes, coronary heart disease, and dental caries. Edward L. Bierman, MD, reviewed the evidence for links between sugar intake and type 2 diabetes, coronary heart disease, and dental caries. He concluded that there was strong evidence linking sugar and dental caries, but there was no such strong evidence linking sugar intake with type 2 diabetes or obesity. Bierman's opinion reflects the popular idea that obesity is the cause of insulin resistance rather than the opposite. The possibility of reverse causation, that insulin resistance precedes the development of obesity, had yet to be considered. Then here's a quote. Adiposity appears to be the major determinant of the emergence of glucose intolerance and adult onset diabetes, not carbohydrate and particularly not sucrose intake. There is no known biological basis for the hypothesis that would relate higher sucrose or carbohydrate intakes to the causation of diabetes. On the contrary, a low-fat, high-carbohydrate diet, by leading to less obesity, may cause a reduced prevalence of diabetes.
I wonder, it doesn't say what year he said this, but this messaging was really the messaging that we got, all through the 80s and 90s. And it was, an excuse. And I remember hearing this and using this as an excuse to eat sugar.
I remember as a teen hearing someone say that sugar doesn't cause diabetes. And I just remember thinking, yes, it does. I mean,
yeah.
And I guess part of that is because growing up, we called it sugar diabetes, and everybody knew if you ate sugar, it made it worse.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just what people knew.
But that's what they told us. They told us that it didn't.
But then they turned around and started.
Right. But I wonder how they think that people got obese to begin with.
Well, people weren't that obese. I mean, even in the 70s and early 80s, people weren't that obese overall, and
but they had related it here to, it says insulin resistance precedes the development of obesity, or no, I'm sorry. I'm reading the wrong sentence.
Yeah, they're saying obesity.
They related it. They said basically that that anyway. I can't even find it now. I'm so tore up about that guy coming up to my car.
Oh yeah,
Right.
yeah. So
Okay. So it says adiposity appears to be the major determinant of the emergence of glucose intolerance and adult onset diabetes. But why? How do they think that people got the adiposity? You know?
Right. When low carb diets used to be used to, I mean, everybody knew that you cut out, like, for example, if you look in old TV shows, like the diet meal at a restaurant would be like a burger patty, you know what I'm saying, and some cottage
Yeah.
cheese and a little bit of salad. I mean, that was like the diet plate back in the 70s.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was common knowledge that you ate low carb, meat and stuff, some low carb veg to lose weight. It was common knowledge. But then to make this statement here saying that the only time they get type 2 diabetes or what triggers it is them getting larger, gaining the weight first, that just doesn't, because, and I will tell you that, of course, I know it's the insulin that my mother took that did it, but I mean, she started out slim.
Yeah.
But gradually, I mean, she just started gaining that weight.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, this was when they were really attacking saturated fats,
Mm-hmm.
and they were wanting to blame everything on the saturated fat and not on the sugar and the carbs. So
Yeah.
I'm assuming they figured that, well, if you're fat, it's because you're eating too much fat.
You just need to eat less and move more.
Eat less and move more. That'll solve everything.
That's right. That's right.
And of course, notice that if it doesn't work, it's your fault.
Yeah.
It's the patient's fault. You didn't do what you were
Yeah.
told. You didn't eat less enough and move more enough.
Right, for long enough.
Yes, and for long enough.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So interesting.
Lost my glasses.
So Dr. Bierman did not foresee the global explosion in obesity and type 2 diabetes that would be unleashed by the low-fat, high-carbohydrate dietary guidelines of McGovern's committee. Well, yeah, obviously he didn't. That one just went.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
With regard to carbohydrates and coronary heart disease, Bierman acknowledged concerns that a high carbohydrate diet increases blood triglyceride concentrations, which may well represent a risk factor for the development of coronary disease in the U.S. population. But he discounted the importance of this effect of high carbohydrate diets, concluding that the atherogenic potential of these dietary manipulations has yet to be explored. Any possibility that a low-fat, high-carbohydrate diet might be harmful was simply implausible, given the strength of the belief in Key's unproven hypotheses.
Interesting. You'd think that they would look at other species like we're learning about, like bears, right? That they go crazy on berries and everything, trying to build up their fat for the winter, and I mean, I realize that each species is not exactly the same, but at least you think that they would at least be going, maybe we should look at this carb thing.
Well, it's seasonal eating. I mean, that's what we used to do because that was like all we had. I mean, even in the 1800s, when people had more variety in terms of, like, there was corn and other things that were grown in the United States, I'm using as an example, we still ate seasonally. There wasn't fruit all year round. The berries were only in a certain time of year, and you only got them for a week or two, and then the berries were gone. The apples were only at a certain time, or just whatever fruits you could find were. Right. It wasn't that you ate them all the time and with every meal even.
Right.
And a lot of times, I mean, what happened was grandma would take them and make them into a treat. And it was a treat that you had. You didn't eat pie every week, every day, or every week. You might have pie maybe 2 or 3 times a year. You
Yeah.
know, she might save some berries and then or some apples and make an apple pie like at Thanksgiving or something. But there certainly wouldn't be just pies all the time. I mean, it was just a whole different eating pattern. So even going beyond our ancestors, like what our tribal ancestors did, I mean, when you even get up into more recent centuries, we still ate very seasonally.
Yeah. And even, I mean, remember when we were going through the obesity code, how we were all talking about how we grew up eating. And that is how, you know, we'd have the 3 meals a day, and it wasn't just eating all day long. And, you know, I know for me, the portions were pretty small. Being raised by Depression era parents, they always had Depression era portions, you know, but it wasn't a free for all as a kid growing up. Like I couldn't just go, and they weren't stocking the pantry full of snacks and
No, that was unheard of.
no, and I couldn't just go and grab whatever I wanted whenever I felt like it. And, you know, but my mom baked. So she would bake, you know, maybe a couple batches of cookies, and she would freeze most of them. And she would just take a few out of the freezer, you know, and every once in a while, if, you know, and we'd have a couple, like 2 cookies, 2, you know, normal size cookies, not the big ones, you know, and that was kind of, that was just the way I grew up too. So it's just been maybe over the past several decades, maybe 40 years or whatever, that things have gotten very different. I'm sure that the affluence of our country contributes to that as well. People have a lot of, you know, at least did have a lot of money to spend on treats, and things are convenient, you know.
Yeah.
So you're back with us, Kim?
She's back.
Yes, my phone, it died. It's like it's rookie day here on the internet, you know. It's like I've never done a live before.
That's
Well,
okay.
you are handling it with grace.
We are glad you're here and you made it.
I thought it was really important for me to bring my son to his class tonight. I could have had his brother bring him, but he had to take him to his first class on Tuesday. And I was just, I don't know, he's really nervous about starting college, and
Yeah.
you know, so I thought, well, maybe it'll help if I'm there. And,
Oh, good mom.
you know, so
My son would have been, I don't want you anywhere near this campus. Leave.
My son, same with my son.
well, so you know, my son that just graduated was homeschooled, so he hasn't been in a classroom setting since he was in middle school. So he's just been really a little bit nervous about it, and he's doing really well. I mean, I listened in on one of his classes earlier today, and you know, the good thing about homeschooled students is they're usually not afraid to talk to adults because you know, they're not in a classroom on a regular basis with just people their own age. You know, they're used to interacting with people of all ages. So it's been a blessing for us. We've really enjoyed having our boys homeschooled, and I mean, their personalities changed virtually overnight when we brought them home. But
Wow.
and you know, and they've explored their own interests. I mean, he's an artist, and well, him and his brothers are all 3 musicians. 3 of my 4 boys are musicians. One of them's getting ready to start playing. I'm not trying to brag, y'all. I swear.
No, go for it.
I'm so
They're
proud
good.
of them, though. So maybe I am a little bit, but anyway. And then the middle 2 are artists, and I mean, they're like really, to me, really good. Like they do digital art, and then the one that's here, he draws too, and he draws really good. Like it's. But
Like
anyway, they have
sketches?
time to explore their own, you know, like their own interests, and
Like
they've gotten really
He
good.
does sketches, like pencil drawing.
Yeah.
Cool.
Like he uses pencils, he uses brush pens. He loves brush pens. And yeah, so he does some really cool stuff. But
That's
I
awesome.
might have to show y'all sometime.
Yeah, you should. Oh man, I appreciate talent, you know?
He
Yeah,
likes to draw.
I identify with
manga.
all the artists because I was going to design album covers. That was what I was going to do
That is
when
so
I grew
cool.
up. Yeah, but I
love
didn't,
that.
of course, but I used to love to draw. There's Eddie over there. I painted him.
Well,
Iron Maiden's Eddie. So
we
Yeah.
have to. Sometimes we have to grow up and get our real jobs so that we can support our. Here I go again. Okay.
Flipping.
So that we can support ourselves and our families and stuff. But if you have that love for art, I mean, a lot of times you can do that, continue it on as a hobby, and maybe have a little side gig with it. So that's kind of what I want for them. He's going to be going to nursing school, so
yeah.
he's following in Mama's footsteps.
He'll need an outlet to relax and everything because nursing school is not easy.
Yeah, and I mean, how many nurses do you know that are artists and musicians? Like almost none. So it'll be a really cool, talking point for him or with the other nurses.
Awesome. I love it. Love it. All right. So you are up.
Okay. Energy intake and chronic disease. This is section 1.3.6.4. Theodore Van Itali reviewed the role of excess calorie consumption as a cause of chronic disease. There is no evidence that obese individuals develop increased fat storage owing to a high consumption of carbohydrate as compared with fat or protein. Man and experimental animals more readily become obese on diets low in carbohydrates and high in fat, but this can be explained in terms of differences in palatability and a somewhat greater heat loss from carbohydrate. There is no evidence that the higher caloric density of fat is itself responsible for undue weight gain. He concluded that obesity was strongly and likely causally related to a number of chronic diseases, most especially what he termed carbohydrate intolerance. The temporal association between obesity, carbohydrate intolerance, and adult onset diabetes mellitus is very close. The association with carbohydrate intolerance is manifest in only a few weeks. His biological explanation for these relationships ignored the possibility of reverse causation. Increased storage of triglycerides in adipose tissue is invariably accompanied by adipocyte hypertrophy. This in turn leads to carbohydrate intolerance, insulin insensitivity, and hyperinsulinemia. The insulin insensitivity of hypertrophic adipose tissue, as well as of other tissues of the obese, has been demonstrated in various in vitro preparations. The tissue changes engendered by obesity are presumably related to the exacerbation of carbohydrate intolerance and diabetes that is observed clinically. What is especially interesting in retrospect is that Van Itali includes no mention of the nature of the diet that he believes will prevent or reverse obesity. By his reckoning, it must be a low-fat, high-carbohydrate diet.
I'm confused.
Me too.
Because is it just me or does it sound like they're like talking out of both sides of his mouth?
He contradicted himself there.
Yeah.
Because at first I was shaking my head, and then I was like, "Oh, wait," and then I'm like, "No." It's like back and forth.
Like,
it's like, what is it? So what does he think?
It sounds like he's.
I bet he would just say it's hereditary.
Right. That's
yeah.
Some people are just carbohydrate intolerant. Right.
And how does one get to be carbohydrate intolerant? Let's see. Maybe the same way that people get to be drug intolerant. I mean, maybe the same way, and by intolerant, I mean develop a tolerance. They have to have higher and higher. I don't know. It tracks for me, but maybe that's just me.
Well, I mean, so he's talking about chronic disease, right? Compared to, the whole thing is energy intake and chronic disease, but he seems to be focusing on obesity. And, he does kind of go into some, insulin resistance and hyperinsulinemia, but he's really, I mean, chronic disease in this section is really, I mean, he mentions that obesity was strongly and likely causally related to a number of chronic diseases, not your energy intake. So I don't know.
And then he provided no mention of the actual diet that he believes will prevent or reverse obesity.
Right.
So he kind of just like threw some stuff out there and then said, "Oh, I don't know."
Right. So he's saying that there's no evidence that obese individuals develop increased fat storage based on a high consumption of carbohydrates as compared to fat or protein. So he's saying that he doesn't believe you can get obese with high carbohydrate diet. But then he also says there's no evidence that a high fat diet is going to make you gain weight either. So he concludes it's just carbohydrate intolerance. Okay. An increased storage of triglycerides. He talks about that. So, but your triglycerides get high because of carbohydrates, right?
Mm-hmm.
So wouldn't that be an effect of a high carbohydrate diet? If you have triglycerides that go too high and causing, then you store them in the adipose tissue and you get hypertrophy of the adipose sites. I don't know. He's just confused. This whole section just is like, what's he actually saying here?
I honestly wonder if if the mainstream even realizes that high carbohydrates cause high triglyceride levels, because I've heard it explained before where it didn't sound like they did understand that, and I only understood that because my mom is a laboratory technologist, and she would tell me that. She would say, if you eat too much candy, that she would attribute it to candy because she likes hard candy, She'd say, if you eat too much candy, your triglycerides will go up. And I don't think that people associate that. I think that they think it's from fats.
Probably. Because there's association between, I know in my mind, there was an association between dietary fat and your lipid profile, and never realizing that it was really like, well, how could carbohydrates affect your lipid profile? They're not lipids. But they don't. It's like, the whole biochemistry of the body is so different than what you would automatically think. They would say, garbage in, garbage out, right? As if, whatever you eat is going to automatically have that, like, that's how your body's going to be affected. Like if you eat fat, you're going to get fat. If you eat, but carbohydrates like vegetables, no, you can't get fat on vegetables, right? But I think, I'm not saying that there aren't people who are more carbohydrate sensitive than others. I think that but the question is why. Like, do we start out that carbohydrate and sensitive, or is that something that develops over years or decades of our lives? So more questions than answers on that one. So okay, well, I'll read the last two little sections and then we can call it a wrap there. It's probably a good place to stop for the day.
Okay.
Yeah, because my son should be coming out probably pretty soon.
So tiny little section here on alcohol and liver disease. This is the reviews of the relationship between alcohol and liver disease concluded that there is strong evidence that excessive alcohol consumption causes chronic liver disease. but there is no evidence that alcohol plays any role in coronary atherosclerosis. So I don't know. Not sure what they don't mention what studies that was based on, but I know that there's also association with alcohol, overuse of alcohol and issues with the pancreas as well. So, okay. And then the last part here is salt and hypertension. So in his review of any possible relationship between dietary salt intake and the development of arterial hypertension, Tobian concluded that 80% to 91% of the U.S. population are resistant to the development of hypertension and so have no need to lower their dietary salt intake. However, for those who are, quote unquote, genetically susceptible to hypertension, a lifelong modest restriction of sodium chloride intake to levels less than 60 milliequivalent per day in adults will probably prevent the onset. I love it when they use that word, right? Prevent the onset of hypertension indefinitely and also prevent all subsequent hypertensive complications. Identification of those at risk for the development of hypertension is key, according to Tobian. He was clearly unaware of the evidence that arterial hypertension is a key marker of insulin resistance. So, okay.
Yeah.
I think that's one of those common sense things that, we talk about this from time to time, that we just know, like when we learn it in school or wherever we learn it, we're like, that's not right. That's one of those things. And sometimes I don't know, most of the time, I don't know how I know that that's not true, other than just like putting it into practice in my life and like seeing other people put it into practice and being like, that doesn't seem associated, If that was the case, then I have a relative who would have really bad hypertension,
Oh, yeah.
if salt really caused it.
Yeah. It's probably very multifactorial, like most things.
Yeah. I mean, if you do have a problem with hypertension, then I think that it could, like, let's say you have like CHF and you got hypertension. I think at that point, you might want to watch your salt, but you still need some. And the way they put these post-heart patients, like these post-cabbages, post-open heart surgery patients, and anybody who's had a stent or heart attack or anything, they put them all on this low sodium diet. And I'm just like, this can't be good. But I mean, I'm no doctor, so whatever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know I hear people talk, and if, of course, I worked too in cardiac. I know they always did that. It was a low sodium diet, and often for kidney patients too. And you hear people talk about, oh, well, if I have too much sodium, I swell up, and we know that in the body, the whole osmotic thing with that the water follows fluid, and but I'm just curious to know, like, why is there a difference between table salt and the mineral salts that we eat primarily as carnivores?
So, not to change the subject off of that question you just asked, I don't know the answer to that. I eat all kinds of salt, but I just think that what were you just saying about the diet? And shoot, it's gone.
About people noticing retaining water when they have salt?
Oh, yeah. So is it that, or is it the Chinese food that they ate? You know what I'm saying? Like, is it all the carbs?
Yeah.
Because if I eat a bunch of carbs, I'm going to swell up.
Right.
So I almost think that a lot of times, a lot of those really carb-heavy meals come with a lot of sodium, and maybe people are associating that with that. Because like, I'm an N of one here. I'm just an anecdotal story, but I've never noticed any association between any type of sodium, like on my meat,
right,
minus the carbs. Now, if I eat, rice, I'm going to swell up.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, me too. Me too.
Yeah.
I look like I'm about 4 months pregnant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think you're right. I think it is probably the fact that they're eating really high
And
sodium
who
carbohydrates.
would just eat like just sodium? Like nobody's eating just sodium. You know,
Right.
everybody's just going around like, oh, let's just eat a bunch of salt and see if we swell up. You know.
Well, I mean, we take electrolyte packets, right? I mean, a lot of us would,
Yeah,
and I
I've
don't
never had that.
never had
It's
any
never been a
problem.
problem.
Yeah. So
And I love regular plain iodized table salt. Just the kind with the little umbrella girl.
yeah,
I
Umbrella
love
Girl.
that. Morton's or whatever it is. It's
So
fine with me.
Sandra says that table salt has added anti-caking agent, which is an aluminum byproduct.
I mean, I've eaten it my whole life. Let me tell you, the table salt is not my problem.
I don't use table salt anymore. I use my kitchen table is kind of funny because I have like 4 different kinds of salt on it.
Yeah, I do too
And
at home, but at work, like I just have to get what I can get.
oh yeah. At a restaurant, yeah, you just take whatever unless you have unless you bought from Carrie and Homestead How you bought your little Redmond's, travel salt container. So
I've got the little salt box with the flakes, Have you all seen the flakes?
Like the mold. Is it
they're
the Malden?
So good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I put that on everything. I love those. But
yeah, it's very, very concentrated. Like you don't have to use very much.
Oh no.
I have over salted things and Dave has just gone, I can't even.
Yeah, I have too, for sure.
All righty. So we're going to leave out the next section, which we'll pick up next. And are you working next Thursday or no?
No.
Okay. All right. So the next section that we'll pick up next week is called Response of the American Medical Association to the USDA Dietary Goals for America. I can't imagine it's going to be a good response that we'll agree with, but that's what we're
And we've made it to page 42. Woo!
All right. So let's see. Chapter 1 ends on what page? It barely
977.
56. Yeah, it kind of barely trickles over. So basically 55. We're done.
So we're getting pretty good.
We're getting there. We're only 10 chapters.
Considering this is such dense material that honestly I have to listen back to and go over it a second time for it to sink in a lot of times.
Yeah.
And just that this is a textbook, and we want to really understand it. I think we're making pretty good progress.
I think so. Let's see. So we have another comment from Joss about salt. So it's high salt in the presence of high insulin. That's the problem. That's what you were, the carbs, right? Ben Bickman or Rick Johnson talks about this. So yeah, so that makes complete sense. Like you were saying, it's the Chinese food and it's the whatever else with all of that's spiking the insulin.
Yeah.
With the salt. So I guess the question is that who
is Rick Johnson? I've never heard of him.
I've heard that name, but I couldn't tell you much about him. Anything about him, really.
It sounds like it's going to be a very, very common name to go and find out. So, like, do you have like a YouTube channel or something that we can look him up? Because
I'm thinking I heard Dr. Berry mentioning very recently.
Rick Johnson. I don't know. It's not ringing a bell, but I'm sure if Dr. Berry has interviewed him, I've seen him.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd be curious to know if they looked at people who and of course this would require a nutritional study, which is not that great, but if they looked at people who ate like a carb intensive high sodium meal versus like the same carb intensive but low sodium meal, and see if it, was it really the addition of the salt or is it the carbs? I don't know. Curious to know if it's like a synergistic thing with the salt plus the carbs.
Well, I know carbs definitely make me swell up.
Yeah. So All right, very good. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. Greatly appreciate the feedback. It's always nice to get feedback from you guys because we have a lot we don't know. Like never heard of Rick Johnson before.
And I am sorry for my situation today.
The
I
gymnastics.
thought it would go a lot more smoothly, but I didn't realize that because I never use my phone for the lives. So I didn't realize that when your phone rings, you get like messed up.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the book, Nature Wants Us to Be Fat. That is Rick Johnson's book.
Oh, okay.
Oh, and look who showed up right at the end here.
Oh, Dr. Nelson.
Well, you're eating picanha, resilience. I am breaking through the fast. I'm jealous.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow. I'm jealous of that 3-day fast.
I don't know what jealous about that. I've never been able to accomplish a 3-day fast, but I haven't tried
the autophagy.
Yeah, I haven't tried the 3-day fast since I was on carnivore. I did one before I was carnivore, and I only made it to the end of day 2. So yeah. I might do better if I like prime ahead of time. And so awesome. Okay, and then Dr. Rick Johnson is good friends with Ben Bickman and has also appeared on Dr. Barry. He's really good. Well, we have someone new to check out now.
Yeah, we do.
I'll probably recognize him when I see him if he's been on Dr. Barry, because I think I've literally seen every one of Dr. Barry's videos, and I don't know if I'm embarrassed to say that or proud of that.
Well, you definitely watch Dr. Barry a lot, so I'm gonna have to write.
So do I.
I'm gonna have to write the name of this book down. I've got so many notes here. I'll probably lose it anyways, but Nature.
Okay, my son is coming out, so I'm gonna get off here, guys.
Awesome. Well, thanks, you guys. Glad to see you. Glad to see y'all.
Thanks for watching, guys.
All right, then I'm gonna go ahead and end it, and we'll see you next week.